Well, hey there team, welcome back to the channel and welcome to my review of Classified France 44. What an absolute banger of a game. I've been consuming this. It has been a delight. Straight out of the gate, is it worth your time? Is it worth your money? Yes, resoundingly. One of the best games I've played so far. In a year that's already off to a banger start, we've had some absolute rippers. I will cover off for those on across it. I have kind of one objective standard when I review games. That being for every $5 Australian that a game asks of me, I ask that it gives me an hour of good, clean gameplay loop. So this game is going for $50 odd, 51, something like that Australian. We'll call it 10 hours. I've put that much in. I'm going to put more in. I'm probably going to play it through again on the harder difficulty. Not that there was anything wrong with this. In fact, we could talk about the ramp. The ramp difficulty in this is expertly done. In fact, that's probably the main takeaway from this game. Every single system, mechanic, part of the loop is expertly designed and synergizes so well. It's actually kind of mind-blowing how well it works, slotting all the gears and the moving parts together to the point where it's not really something that I sort of rate on a scale or think super hard about. You know, game's good, game's bad, whatever. Even bad games can be fun, but as far as like sort of mechanical mastery of gameplay, whiteboard, fundamental design, this is like the best I've seen in a very long time. As opposed to something like, I don't want to draw too much heat because I enjoy Pal World, right? But Pal World is very much, let's throw as much shit against the wall and see what sticks. And it turns out there was a lot of cool things in that scattergun that stuck and it's fun. So this is a sort of opposite gameplay design. So as far as difficulty ramp goes, in the beginning, it's fairly gentle, easing you in. And you can kind of be a little bit belligerent in your fire and movement and not really lean into abilities. But it does have a sort of exponent ramp that paces well with the player. Again, this isn't something I really talk a lot about specifically, but it inspires me to unpack it. Like having a linear difficulty ramp doesn't work and will actually create boredom, even if your micro loop is fun. What I sort of mean is if you have mission 1 and then you have mission 2 and you just, I don't know, increment the difficulty by one step to the next mission and then the mission after that, another step. Problem is that the player learns your systems much faster than that. And you sort of have to keep pace, or rather the developer needs to keep pace with how quickly the player will pick up the mechanics in the beginning. So if you just have a straight line linear scale, you will end up with a bored player that outpaces the game. So this actually starts fairly easy, dare I say, in the first couple of missions while you're getting your head around it. But as the timer ticks towards D-Day, and narratively, there's little snippets that go in there. You're sort of aggravating the SS and they bring the Gestapo in at some point as well. And they are just like Agent Smiths out of the Matrix. But what I'm getting about, like, and I'm talking very high level, but in broad strokes, is the further you go into the game, the more that it compounds the difficulty in a truly fun and asking the player to step up to the challenge kind of way. To the point where now, like, I'm absolutely sweating bullets and thinking about it, but not getting bogged down in it either. Don't get me wrong, I love a good cerebral game, but this one leans a lot more towards, let's say, action, run and gun in that XCOM space. If you were to compare two great examples, XCOM 2, a lot of fairly cerebral and a lot of systems, to say something like Gears Tactics. If you've played that, that's a little bit more about setting up combo chains and trying to get executions to generate more action points and run momentum. It has a bit more of a run and gun feel. Wonderful game, of course, but they sort of tickle different parts of your brain intentionally. This sits somewhere in between those two, and it has a couple of inspirations from Gears. The combo chaining is a good point, but it is limited. So you can upgrade your dudes in such a way that maybe when they get a kill with their primary weapon, a submachine gun or something like that, it then lets them essentially get another attack, but it has a ceiling on it. It has a hard cap. You only can do it once. So it has that sort of sentiment, but again, it sort of walks the line between the two. Meta sort of world components are complicated enough. So another great example of phenomenal game design from a project creep perspective, as I come from a background of, project management is part of the sort of postings that I've done in the past, through military engineering. And that's one thing that blows my mind against a lot of game development here. And I'm not just saying indie level, I'm saying AAA level, that they just do not seem to understand how to control scope. And that's why you have things get delayed and launch broken and all this sort of stuff. So this is complex enough, appropriately complex. You don't have like a tech tree or anything like that, or base management. What you do have is loadouts, character growths, and a character tree that is very reminiscent of Chaos Gate Demon Hunters. I don't know, sphere grid-esque thing, but it's more about going down trees. Again, complicated enough, creates build diversity. You have different factions within the sort of French resistance, the criminals, the Gaullists, the radicals, and you're kind of courting them all at once, filling in different sectors, and then you have antagonistic sort of enemy armies moving around. Again, like a Gestapo presence, that sort of thing, and you're trying to slow them down as they try and pull apart the resistance that you build up. But all of this is in service to a doom timer, which is D-Day, and you're building towards that, and you're trying to get ready for the invasion as best you can. All the while building out your team, recruiting permanent characters. It's not RNG or anything like that, which usually is a trope, and something I really like about XCOM type games is the idea of emergent storytelling and attachment through randomly generated characters makes the story your own. But in this case, no, they've got a curated touch to it, but a lot of the missions will be either ors, right? So it's like you have to choose between recruiting this dude over here, I'm using my arms, and recruiting that dude, like a Moroccan submachine gunner dude nicknamed Olive, and he's quite cool. I've gotten fond of him. There's a bloody Australian and a friggin' KFF slouch, which is wild that even that terminology is in here. Let's represent Australia. And he's throwing out boganisms left, right, and centre. So I recruited him immediately, and he's on his Bren gun. Well, he's on an MG42 these days because of the partisan nature, and there is like a loot system, green, blue, purples, that sort of stuff, but a lot of it is sort of requisitioned or repurposed German weaponry. But yeah, you've got like cosmetics as well, so you can put them all in different hats and gear, and it's cool. There's some female parts that make sense within the war, again, the resistance-based partisan war effort in the French field. I've got this ex-librarian chick on my team, and she's running around in a bloody skirt and beret, and you can equip her with female gear, and now she's actually a fucking monster with a shotgun going ballistic. It's one of my favorites. But it's just really cool. Like, dare I say it? Dare I even point it out? But this game does diversity correctly. As in, it makes sense. I've got, kind of generic, boring Captain Hero main character dude. He's kind of the most generic lot. He's just some American bloke. And he's got like a British, high tea kind of sidekick as well. For kick a country. But I've also picked up like a Canadian rifleman or submachine gunner, I can't quite remember. And so he has some thoughts as well. And interesting, all you dudes have chats around the campfire behind, on the back end of finishing a mission. So they'll just have like a sort of one-on-one. It's very brief. They get a little stat bonus as well, but it doesn't slow the pace down again. I'm raving about it. I could give examples all day. All of the design is absolute A+ level. So yeah, you have these little character development moments, but they're only once per between mission, and they're only for like a minute, and they do not slow you down. But yeah, so he shares his sort of Canuck French background with the Frenchies, and they've talked around that sort of stuff, which has been interesting. There's a dude on my team that I've just recently recruited. He's an American soldier, but he's actually German born, and he left during all the troubles kicking off in 36 because of his background, and now he's come back in, and they touch on that briefly, just enough. They don't browbeat you. They treat you like someone with your own bloody higher process and just throw some interesting themes out there. But yeah, it's just very, very impressive. I've become very attached to all my different characters. There is no permadeath, which again, I'm saying a lot of things that if you pitched this to me in an elevator, I'd be turned off. The no random characters, no permadeath, to me, those are very important parts of these sort of games. Instead, what happens is your guys can have a down, they can get knocked down, and some elite enemy leader units mirror you as well, and they can also get down and revive. So they have a 3-turn timer before they revive, and if they go down again, that's it, they retreat, and they get a massive XP sort of deficit from the mission, and they're out of it, and you got to try and finish the mission, and be careful not to snowball. Now you're down one dude, you've only got 3 left, you're potentially going to lose some more as well. On top of that, you guys get all different sort of injuries. They take morale issues, fatigue. There's sort of 3 different types there, and it compounds if you do let them get downed in combat. So yes, it doesn't have permadeath, but you have a roster of like 8 dudes or whatever, and if you're not managing it properly, if you're being belligerent, it will become death by 1,000 cuts. Dare I say, this is a brilliant system, and I really would have assumed you couldn't do this properly, and yet here we are. It works very, very well. The variety of missions has been really fun as well. It's driven in large part by sub-missions, and it is a bit gamey. You know, it'll be like kill this dude and that dude in the same turn or whatever, you know, and you really do want to get those side quests, but they add that wrinkle of difficulty. But very much the hit-and-run nature of this format works really well with the punchy sort of half-hour-long missions that they are. Get in, do the mission, get out, being dogged by waves of enemies, and you can't just sort of straight run through cover. They are very, very, well, dogged in that you have to kind of do rolling retreats, and it's always very thrilling. It's actually wild. I have so many just random missions in my mind, you know, blowing up a railroad, sabotaging a tank factory. It's just really cool. And obviously I'm very, very smitten with this game, but it kind of boggles my mind. It's almost like seeing something new in that they are just doing so much right in this game. Even the stealth ambush stuff, they don't just lift XCOM 2's Initiate. In this case, there are 3 sort of types of missions you go straight into. Assault is just straight up combat. You're alert from the very beginning, kill lots of dudes, and they're very grisly sort of affairs. Then you've got ambush, which is basically you can just infinitely walk around and stab dudes in stealth mode, and you can see their patrol paths, and it's not very complex. It's complex enough, again, right? It's not trying to be a stealth game, but it's got stealth elements, and they are low level, but they're still quite engaging. Or then you get the more common mission, which is in between, and that's, I think it's called ambush, where you have a couple of pips, like 4 or 5, I think you can increase it, and every time you stealth kill a dude, it fills that up, and then at the end of that, it forces you into essentially an XCOM 2 Initiate, like increased critical attacks, but it puts the whole base on alert. And that's what most missions are like. So you sort of have this narrative gameplay structure over that 30-minute mission. And the first 5 to 10 is you going around and picking off the first few dudes. But before you can run away with that and dominate the team, it forces you into combat at the boiling point. Again, so much of this is well considered. It doesn't have the 2 action point system, which you see in a lot of these XCOM games. Instead, your dudes have, well, an actual sort of action point allotment, you know, like 13 points or whatever. And some of them, it'll only take 1 point to fire their gun, but it'll end their turn. Some dudes, like the, you know, Bren gunners, they use like 6 points to fire their gun. Another thing, they have not just health bars, but they have suppression bars as well, morale, whatever you'd like to call it. So again, the machine guns, you can strip their morale right down, and if you push it to the halfway mark, they get suppressed, so they fight and move at kind of a penalty. If you manage to deplete the bar entirely, it stuns them, so they miss their turn, so there's kind of a stun juggle management. Melee does the same thing, so if you get up there in a knife fight, you don't do a lot of damage unless your dude is spec'd that way, but you do kind of break them pretty easily. So that's something that you can do, is try and tie up some of their bigger units with knives or MGs and that. So often it comes down to not actually trying to kill the character, but more trying to control them and deprive them of a team, especially with the way that fire works in areas. So if you did have an MG42 overlooking 3 enemy dudes, there's a chance you could suppress and break them all and lock them down and kind of gain turn advantage. But again, that adds another dynamic that I haven't seen in an XCOM game. Usually in XCOM games, the name of the game is develop the flank, get an angle. That's all it is. You don't really want to fight through cover. It's all about trying to angle out your opponent. In this, you're kind of incentivized to have a base of fire. So you still want to develop flanks and angles to get kill shots, but firing on a dude that you still have only 0 or 5% chance to hit, in, you know, inverted commas, is still a legit use of your guy, especially if he's trying to suppress with like a spray type gun. So you won't hurt them, but you can potentially pin them, and everyone sort of has that ability. The list goes on, the video goes on as well. This game is really good if you are an XCOM type fan, and when I say that, I'm talking about cover-based moving, shooting, meta loop management, that sort of stuff. Because there are other ones that, I don't know, let's think of like fantasy setting sort of ones where you're sort of casting spells, and they get a little bit closer into CRPG territory where maybe cover doesn't really play much of a role. I really do like the idea of cover and movement, and this gives you more tools than what I'm normally used to in most XCOM type games. But anyway, my point is, if you're a fan of these sort of games, this is a no-brainer, and I would say a must play. Is it going to sell you if you're jaded on these sort of things? Maybe actually, especially if you like this theme, if you like World War II. This is not really something you see in this genre very much. So that might be worth checking out as well. But yeah, I don't know if this is necessarily doing enough different to super distinguish itself and change your mind on the genre, but it's definitely for fans. It's definitely one of the cleanest, well-considered and put together games, not just in this genre, but just full stop. I guess I had a few bugs in that sometimes you get weird stuck animations, like you do point the gun the wrong way and fire, and occasionally I've noticed they must have had like an animation cancel or something like that, where a dude will essentially stand still and hitch. The action will still pop, but there's a sort of delay. So this could be a memory leak, something like that. But at the same time, like, this is if I were to really go looking for bugs. The amount of times that happened was a handful of times, and it was in no way ever game breaking. Anyway, Scarlett's clearly very happy with this game. What an absolute delight it was to play. Don't need to waffle. I will point out that we're doing the sort of, geez, what am I calling it? Road to Game of the Year. It'll be a weekly thing where I seed these games in a yearly ranking. So watch out for that video at the end of the week. But yeah, spoiler, this is probably going to sit pretty high on the list. Anyway, check it out, team. Might just leave it there for the time being, and I'll catch you guys on the next one.